Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Gemma Creagh and I'm chatting with director Conor McMahon about his hilarious gore fest, Let the Wrong One In. So thank you so much for chatting with us, Conor.
No problem.
It was such a gorgeous film. It's so funny. It's very vintage with a modern twist. Tell me a little bit about how this came to fruition.
Well, I think for a while I had the idea of a vampire set in Dublin, just the character, it seemed like something that would be funny. Like, it made me laugh, the idea of a Dublin vampire. It seemed like something I hadn't really seen, or something that we should have, like, considering we've got Bram Stoker wrote Dracula. It seemed fitting that, Ireland should have some kind of vampire character. And it's like, what would a modern version of that be set in Dublin? I think it also sort of came out of, like, a lot of the films I've made up to now, for some reason, I've set in the countryside. Like, I'm from Dublin. I grew up in Dublin. And I was like, I have to make something that's in my area of where I grew up. And because sometimes I'm writing stuff down the countryside and I'm not from there, and I wouldn't have the same grasp of the dialogue or the turn of phrase. So this was fun to just go, okay, I'm home. It's like where I live. It's like you're absorbing the stuff from your environment, the dialogue or what people are. You're on a bus and you're getting sort of, oh, that's, that could be a funny line, and you go home, put it in the script. So it was sort of a mix of that. Yeah.
It's fabulous. And actually it harks back to your earlier days, to your zombie bashers, where, there was a real Dublin characters in that as well. And again, it's taking kind of what we see in cinema as a well-worn thread and putting it in somewhere that's new and relatable to us as a viewer, but also hilariously funny.
Yeah, and it was always there was always a question of how much it would travel, or how much it would, because the accents are strong and they kind of had to be, because that's part of the humor, just how they talk. But it was something right from the start. It was like, this is the only way to make this, I think, or it's certainly the way that makes me laugh. And yeah, so it was baked into the pie from the beginning.
And what was did people get that it's very local, and then as a result of it being local, it translated, or was there a sticking point with certain things? Like, even for a local audience, there was so much humor jam-packed that I heard jokes being missed, laughing. Like, it's almost like there was like a joke per minute. There was almost like you nearly benefited from, like, the beat and the track, nearly, where people are like, oh yeah.
Well, that probably comes from when I started working in Republic of Telly. And I remember writing my first scripts, and James Cotter, who was the producer on that show, he'd come over and he'd have his red pen, and anything that wasn't a joke, he would cross out, so, like, you might have a character say, hi, how's it going? And it's like gone. It's just like, give me a setup and a joke, And it always impressed me how many jokes you could cram in, something, so I'd say subconsciously it kind of came from, just because I worked on that for 4 or 5 years. So it must have influenced me in some way. It's just that feeling of like, yeah, what's the next thing we're trying to get to,
Yeah, and it was a lovely mix. There's a mix of, like, physical humor, back and forth, like, snappy dialogue, references, like, kind of character interactions, like, it's a lovely sort of cocktail of different kinds of humor. So, you're not getting slapped with the same sort of repetitive jokes over and over, which makes it very interesting view. You kind of feel like, as a viewer, you kind of have to be on your toes to catch everything. Like, and it's not saying that there's stuff to be missed. It's saying that it's so rich and so dense that there's a lot in there humor wise.
Cool. Well, like, part of that as well, it probably came from the long development process. There were other sort of, the actors were kind of involved in the stages, because I had cast them quite early on. So sometimes I'd get them together, we'd improv scenes, and out of that, sometimes jokes would come. Like, I was living, this is 5 years ago now when I started it, but, like, my housemate at the time was a writer, and I'd be coming out bouncing ideas off him, and again, it was just like you say, the stuff absorbed from the environment. There was so there was a lot of my stuff, but also a lot of other people's sort of stuff as well, all mixed together, you know, over a 2 or 3 year development period, you know.
So this started off as like a fun concept that then you were kind of like teasing out. Tell me when funders started to get involved, and when did you again bring people on in a very firm way? How did that happen?
I think so. I wrote the first draft quite quickly, like maybe 2 weeks or something, and it was a bit different. Like it was about two friends, but the concept of a vampire coming to someone's house and hanging around and not leaving, you know, that was the sort of core idea. And then in terms of God, what was I've lost track of the question. What was the question again?
Yeah, but like when did like a sort of how did
funders,
funders, mainly, but also collaborators like Michael Lavelle and you were saying the actors became involved at an earlier stage and you're developing it then. Kind of like how did it sort of form? Just walk me through that because I think it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, so basically when I had the script, it's this weird thing, because it was set in a house with two characters mainly. I was very convinced that I could make it, you know, even if no one gave me money. And I almost feel that has to be the basis for it. It's actually been, if I look at all the films I've made and not made, they've always started with that premise that I kind of think it's going to be, I can make this myself if no one helps me. And so just with that in mind, it starts you behaving like it's going to get made. And so the first step for me was, okay, I need to start casting these actors, you know. So I was like, going to shoot a promo, and I suppose that was another thing. It was like the promo would show people the kind of humor, because sometimes you could read that script and you know, I remember getting notes 1 or 2 times of going, geez, this Deco's very unlikable, like, you know, everyone's going to hate him because he's so mean. But I knew if it was played with the right
tone,
because
there's a cheeky chance or charm that I sell it. But it's like, I'll always say that that's like Sharon Horgan. If you delivered her lines in any other way, she would just be like this, you know, in Catastrophe, she'd be the cold-hearted, cruelest bitch going.
Yeah.
So charming and funny, like she could say anything.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just that way. But like I knew I had to kind of sell that idea, I guess. So we started out doing auditions back in Filmbase, you know, and that's where we found Eoin Duffy. And so the second actor was harder because it was initially two friends. So we did a lot of casting, always with somebody the same age, and it just never worked. Like I could never, you know, it was almost like, you know, someone's close, but it's something. I've never had that problem where it's just not working, and I couldn't figure out. It wasn't funny or something. And then Karl came in by mistake because Michael had worked with him on something else, and he just suggested he'd come along. But he was, like, in my head at the time, totally the wrong age. He was only 15, but I was like, there he is, bring him in. And then it was just that, oh my God, the minute they started bouncing off each other, I think Karl just brought this, you know, that innocent thing with a kid. And it kind of reminded me of those Spielberg-y movies, or it added just that other dimension of the way he reacted to finding out Deco was a vampire was more like fascination, you know? And oh my God, like, you know, and when I just saw his eyes kind of twinkling, like at the idea, that I was like, oh, this has to be the way to capture this. And then it was like, oh, maybe they should be brothers because, you know, and so that totally changed. So just shooting that promo, I went home and I totally rewrote the script so that it would be brothers. Like I remember after that audition just going, I have it now. Like we know what it is. It's going to be two brothers and you guys are going to play the parts, you know? So it was nice to shoot the promo. And then the only issue was just the length of time it took them to, but that said, actually very quickly, the film board expressed interest very early on. So first draft we sent in, they saw the promo, they kind of got the idea of what we were trying to do. And so we just started development of the script, you know, which can take a while, but you know, it was just Karl getting older. We were always like, I hope he still, you know, maintains that sort of innocence, you know? And yeah, every few months I had to check in with him again. And, sometimes he'd be getting braces or something and be like, okay, is that going to be a problem? But then it would just like the years would pass. And it's like, okay,
And he caught him just before retirement.
Yeah.
But that's fascinating. And there's a lovely chemistry. That's one of the selling points between the pair. Like Karl, that kind of, it's almost like the straight guy where he is the audience, but like a little bit more knowing and clued in. And then I think you've the theme of blood is thicker than water. That's a kind of a big selling point, and how much are you willing to put up with? And it actually makes a lot of sense for the plot for them to be related.
Yeah, totally.
You're on board immediately. Like that dynamic is so familiar, and that kind of exhaustiveness.
Yeah, it's almost like, it's the weird thing about making films. It's like people always say you have to be kind of open, because it's like it's almost telling you what way to make the film. It's like, that's so mad. Karl shows up and it completely changes the course of the script. But you could easily have just go, no, he's wrong, and that's what I had. So it's sort of like you kind of have to you're always being pushed and pulled by things that may appear at the time wrong or not what you expected, but it's sort of almost making itself at some point.
Yeah, and then I suppose the wheels of momentum as they're turning, and then Anthony Head. Oh my God, what a perfect, because the nostalgic feel of this as well, like the gore, the visuals, like everything, even though it is a modern setting, the jokes are very modern, the characters are modern, but like there's such nostalgia through it, and it's so enjoyable to watch. And then Anthony Head, like for those of us of a certain age, like he's iconic in the world of vampires.
Yeah. Like, and it was, and like, I mean, he told us he hadn't done a vampire thing since Buffy, which I was surprised about. For some reason, I thought he must show up in low budget vampire comedy films all the time, but like he hadn't done one since. And something about he liked the script, and I remember having that conversation. It's like, Conor, you have to go in and talk to Anthony at 3:00 today, and like that was going to be the phone call that he'll decide or not. And you're kind of going, do I mention Buffy? Do I not mention Buffy? But yeah, no, it was great. It was great to have him. It's like once his name came up, it was like it has to be him. It sort of felt like, who else could it be after that?
I know, and the UK accent as well settles more into our world easier. Like something like, I remember, like someone like a US star. Like the US accent is so jarring in context of film sometimes. Like
yeah.
And it's so funny. Like the English one just sits in. It's just part of that world, and you don't even question it. But tell me a little bit about then getting the kind of finance together to shoot. So when, I mean, presumably if you have to have a few shekels behind you if you're landing Anthony Head, like did you get the money first? Did you pitch it? Did you pitch him along? Is it co-pro funding? Like, where does this come from?
So I guess in terms of the structure of that, it was Film Board, BAI, RTE, MPI, who were like the sales company, and Section 481. I don't think I'm missing that in there. So that's kind of how it was structured, which is almost the simplest way to kind of make one of these films. And so, yeah, like before going to Anthony or anything, that was all after. Like we kind of knew the funding was in place. I mean, the biggest impediment obviously was COVID happening around that time, and just sort of dealing with that. And obviously he was the older actor on the set, and we wanted to, I mean, in a way, it's sort of like the one annoying thing about COVID. Like the plus was, everyone was super organized, and there was no people hanging around chatting on set, which actually weirdly, like I thought it would slow the process down. It was like, this is very efficient now, this is no chatting, no messing, but there's obviously a social element that you miss, like, hanging out with the crew or cast, or that you might have got to know them better or whatever. Like some guys, they take their mask off at the end of the shoot, and I go, who are you? Like, I don't know, I've never seen your face, you know?
There's so many people that like that. You'd see them from there up. And then
Yeah.
actually when you see their whole face, you're like, that's not what I thought you'd look like at
Yeah,
all. It's
yeah,
funny that you
exactly.
imagine
Yeah,
their whole face and it's a completely different face.
totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that, yeah, like imagine working alongside somebody to get that. And it's quite, like it's a close quarters set as well. There's
Mm.
like a lot of it does take place in the house.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, we did pick a relatively big house, you know, so it was easier to film. I mean, there was two things. It was like from other films I've done, like when the house is too small, we needed a house we could trash and not have, the owner of the house come in every evening going, oh my God. Like I remember on Stitches, sometimes there was a scene, a party scene, and there was supposed to be like vomit in the sink or something or whatever, fake vomit. It's like, and the owner would come home and like we'd leave it there for continuity for the next day. And they'd come home and think we're just animals. Do you know what I mean? And it was just like so stressful. Like, so for this, we found a house that was like being sold or renovated. So it was literally like, do whatever you want, and then we'll just clean it up at the end. So it just meant we could, because then you start like not wanting to throw blood around the place because you got, you really have to restrain yourself. So on this, it was like, just do whatever you want.
Very interesting. And where was it actually? That wasn't in Glasnevin, was it?
No, it was Beggar's Bush.
Okay. I was trying to pinpoint. So the locations were very interesting as well. I loved the courthouse,
Oh
the
yes.
crypt. Who landed that one? I did good old chortle at that.
Yeah, yeah. So that, yeah, I mean, they were all in and around Dublin, So we were like, yeah, Transylvania's Dublin Castle, and yeah, the Bram Stoker Museum for the end scene, that's Clontarf. So that felt like it kind of felt fitting as well, that we were filming in that place. But yeah, it was just about, yeah, how many spooky places can you find around Dublin? And it was, I mean, again, it was because it was lockdown when we were filming Dublin Castle, there was no traffic on the streets. So it just in terms of coordinating it, I remember it was just like, it was quite easy, you know?
Yeah, because Ship Street, I think I caught that in there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
there was like that looked brilliant as Transylvania as well, like the one of those little ones. And then I was like, how did you get it so quiet? I was thinking that did you film at like ridiculous o'clock in the morning? But yeah, of course,
No, it was just like no traffic. Yeah, yeah.
brilliant. And so casting was great. Tell me about Mary Murray, because I thought she was amazing in this. She's the perfect
So,
villain.
yeah, yeah. Like Mary came in very early. I think even when I was doing the promo, I might have done auditions, which certainly saw Mary very early. And she came in, dressed up as a vampire, um, really like, her enthusiasm for it was sort of obvious, and kind of, yeah. So it was like it might have been a year or two later when we actually got to get back to fully casting the movie, but I think she always stuck in her head. And yeah, no one else seemed to kind of sort of fit it in the same way, And I think she kind of got yeah, just the humor of it and that kind of thing. So yeah, no, she was great. Yeah, and I went to see her in a play as well. I remember where she was playing, I think a witch or something like that. And after I saw that play, I was like, oh yeah, she'd be good for this.
She's fabulous. Like she was real. I don't know, like she really encapsulated the villain, but yeah, caught a bit of humor and humanity to her a little bit. Like, like she like it's a kind of cartoonish role, but I kind of thought she had a grounded nature of it that
yeah, yeah. And she's so lovely as well. Like it's like the cast were just so nice on this. Do you know what I mean? They're just fun to be around and to kind of play around with.
Brilliant. So like that as well, would you let people improvise and mess around on set? Would you have the space, or with COVID were you restricted in a way that way a little bit?
Like I suppose you always want to. What tends to happen, or what did happen with this, we improvised a lot in rehearsals and a lot beforehand, and a lot of that would be sort of put into the script. So we definitely, the lads used to laugh at me. I'd just say, go on, riff one there, lads, yourselves, and then go. So I mean, Anthony wasn't big on improv in the same way the two lads would be. So when we were doing scenes with those guys, we probably stuck closer to the script, you know. Um, uh, yeah, because sometimes you're just trying to, you know, because you know different actors are into different things, you know. But Anthony would come up with, you know, stuff, but it would generally be written down, and we kind of know what we're doing. But we did lots of improv leading up to it, and just finding the right way to tell the joke. Because sometimes, you know, there's jokes like when he's trying to hypnotize Matt, you know, there's a bit there, but like we played that joke lots of different ways in improv, you know, where you think Matt's more hypnotized than he, but anyway, you know what I mean? You just find ways until eventually you go, okay, that's the funniest version of it, you know? And so, yeah, I think it's the right way to do it because you have a lot of time, or it's just relaxed, you know, when you're doing it earlier. But on set, it's just, you just never have enough time, you know? And we did try some improv stuff, bits and pieces. But I think, yeah, the majority of it was scripted by the time we started shooting.
And this is one of the things that I thought about this film that I think a lot of films in this genre don't have, in that it's funny from the beginning and middle and right through to the end, even though you have like an emotional hook underpinning the whole thing and the relationship with the brothers and the conflict building, and then you have that natural arc. But yet, like, there's still consistently that same beat for beat consistent jokes the whole way, and you would be laughing, and they're sort of fresh. Like,
right, yeah.
That's one of the things that I was like, when I saw it done on screen that way, I was like, do you know what, that's very, very good. Like, and like even the set piece, it's so ridiculous. It didn't kind of like put that aside to go focus on plot or anything like that. Like those jokes are still continuously there, which I really enjoyed. And but you did touch on all those bases. You did get that emotional arc, the character growth, everything is present. But I'm just wondering, did anything change, like writing wise? So you were saying like the dynamics between the brothers changed. Did you know these are the themes you were going to address? Did anything change in that kind of free
like
atmosphere?
I'd say like right from the start, I always knew what I wanted the film to be about, like the crux of it. And it was the scene really where Anthony's going you know, Matt's complaining about Deco all the time. You know what I mean? Anthony says, Anthony calls him an idiot. You know, and Matt thinks he's talking to Deco, and Anthony's character saying, no, it's you. You're an idiot. You let him in. You giving him blood. And so for me, because this was something in my own life where, you know, sometimes you have friends or people in your life and you're complaining about them all the time because they're whatever, taking up your time or taking advantage of you or whatever. And I mean, I was complaining to a friend and he said, and I was like, he's an idiot. And my friend said to me, who's an idiot? And this guy, and he's like, who's an idiot? And then it dawned on me like, oh my God, I'm the idiot. I'm answering the call. I'm doing the thing. I'm going along with everything they say. And it's like, in that moment, I was like freed from it. I was like, oh my God, I don't have to answer that phone when it rings. And I think that was what I wanted to put that idea in the film, that the vampire is just doing what a vampire does. You know what I mean? He's just drinking blood. He's like, you know, like he's just being himself in a way. But Matt's the one who let him in the door. And it's sort of to get that realization. And I think just having that, it's like, okay, having that to hold on to meant that, you know, sometimes you get notes and script and maybe it could be this direction or this, and it, like, no, it always has to be, this is what I'm building towards. And him kind of taking control, like sort of asserting himself, and then finding a new dynamic, I guess, in the end. So yeah, that was always at the heart of it. And then the jokes, yeah, it's funny you're saying about the jokes, because I've watched the film again in different festivals in Europe, and I always thought, like, you know, at the end of the second act, I was missing a few jokes. But then when I watched it in Dublin, I was like, oh, it's just, there's a lot of verbal, it just goes into a bit of verbal humor that they might not have gotten, do you know what I mean? So I was like, oh yeah, there's like more jokes than I remembered, like just the turn of phrase, you know?
Yeah, because it is, and again, they're like it's a big set piece, and there's sort of a lot of ridiculous things happening as well. The situation of the bridesmaids and the hens going to Romania and then them being the sort of
Yes. Yeah.
antagonistic force throughout the whole thing was hilarious. Because
Oh
I think
yeah.
that's the thing where everything is so familiar, and then you actually put it in this context. I'm like, yeah, they are an antagonistic force. Whenever you go anywhere, you're like, oh God, like, and I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
been them, like been in the end party, and you are just like wrecking everything. So it
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
really funny choice.
I guess it was kind of like the Sheila character as well. She's like, because I didn't want to make the vampires just about an addiction thing, or they're kind of more just like narcissistic, selfish type people, and that just manifests in different sort of forms, And she's like, off cheating on her husband, pleasure seeking, doing what she wants, whatever. So it's sort of I was more just trying to see what are and also like to say, yeah, very things that are very recognizable from Dublin, like that pink Hummer that they drive around in, like.
Like it's perfect. And tell me a little bit about were there any darlings that had to die either in the writing process, shoot, or edit?
Like I really fought for most of my sequences, like there were definitely ones that were talked about being cut, like the car chase thing, because we had someone on wires flying around, and there was, God, maybe the wires are going to create shadows, and it's going to be impossible to rub them out, and this kind of thing. So there was the carriage scene, almost like I was really fighting for that carriage. I was like, I get a horse from Grafton Street if you have to. I mean, the one thing I did lose was I wanted another night shoot, because I kind of wanted when Sheila arrives at the house that it's sort of darkness in darkness, and it was like, I don't know, the budget just wouldn't stretch for one more night shoot. And then it was like, oh, I have to rewrite that during the day, and it wasn't as spooky as I probably wanted it to be, like because there's a scene in Lost Boys I always love where the vampires show up outside the house, and you just hear all these motorbikes going around and lights in the window, and it's smoky, and it's that I was like, I want that kind of a rival. But yeah, sometimes you're just like, okay, how do I sort of rework that.
And like that, if you had been given more, say, money or more time to like maneuver things, or like an extra, someone had been like, oh, I found an extra good chunk of change in the budget. Is there anything that you would have liked to have added to it or extended a bit more?
um I think you could. I mean, I could definitely have. And this was a product of COVID as well. Was the club scene? We could have probably had more lights and smoke. Like we were only allowed like 15 people, because of COVID, and it was like, how am I gonna? So I had to green screen people and stick them in, and there was a bit of that had to be done. But that could have been a bigger, or even just an exterior of it. You could have built something that's a bit more.
The course is perfect. Like it's so, because it's such a recognizable building, and you're like,
Yeah,
oh my God.
yeah,
Like
maybe like that's the thing. Like,
yeah. I don't know, like that for me, every time I saw that on screen, I was just laughing. And if you know, and if you don't know, it's you're just like, oh, what an impressive, scary building.
yeah, exactly. See, this is the thing. Maybe more money doesn't really help you. You sort of, it's like when George Lucas gets to do what he wants. It's never as good as when you're sort of scrapping around for what you're trying to do. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't more blood. you know.
A bigger blood budget.
Yeah.
Uh,
Certainly more like uh maybe more special effects stuff.
I don't know. I
I,
loved the kind of naff
yeah, and
flying
that's
above the city, special
yeah,
effects. Like I thought that added a lot to like that kind of like cheesiness, that vintage
yeah. And it
vibe.
was something we talked about. It was always the intention to kind of, how do we keep it so it's fun, you know what I mean? And it kind of feels a little like, it's almost like if you had all the money in the world, it wouldn't be as good, you know? It's
Yeah.
like, and that gave us leeway, because sometimes when you're working with effects people and stuff, they're always trying to do it the best version of it. And it'd be like, look, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's not what we're going for, you know? So that's what always, like I mean, you obviously try and make it be as good as it can be, but or maybe it almost gave me the confidence to do those sequences that otherwise might seem crazy, like, you know, like a car chase with a bat coming around. And I'm almost like, whatever way this lands, you know, if we just attempt it, you know, it'll probably land okay, you know?
And half bat.
Yeah.
Half person. I think that's the most enjoyable part of it.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about then the edit process and then the sound effects and putting everything together. Did anything sort of like, what was were there any surprises there? Because like, you're an editor yourself.
Yes. So like for me, yeah, the editing was interesting because I had almost shot a lot of the film with, I just mean with like me and some actors and sometimes some of the guys and sometimes friends, and like because I had the house in advance and we had this 6 months of a lockdown, I kind of, you know, acted out a lot of the scenes. And so basically I had a really good idea of how it was all going to cut together, you know? So sometimes that leaves, you know, you hear these stories about people who get into the edit room and, you know, they discover the film, or they've got like so much footage, like, you know, they've got, it's a 4 hour cut.
If
But
you
like,
wake up Ron Burgundy, so you've let the wrong one in too.
Exactly. Like that just didn't exist on this. Do you know what I mean? It was almost like the first edit was, I don't know, it was a bit longer, but it was like maybe 120 minutes long, you know. Uh, but like Brian Philip Davis, who was the editor, you know, he did a really good job, because even though I have, you know, my version of it, you know, there is something about just someone who's a, like, I am an editor, but it's nice to have just a fresh idea. And he even like, I think he picked that Franz Ferdinand track for the start, or it could have been him or Ruth were into the music more. But you know, when that landed, and just seeing him cut to the rhythm of that, you know, that I hadn't quite figured out how that would work. And then just tightening it up and stuff. But I'm usually pretty good at kind of, like, I don't mind cutting stuff out, you know, if people kind of feel it's something is too slow or too boring or anything like that. But yeah, I think because we'd filmed a lot of it, it just meant we could, like, I probably shot what I needed. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't really, because those sequences are quite complicated. Like for example, the bat. I keep talking about the bat chasing, but like we previs that. So like on the day, it was literally like, I just need the bit where the vampire looks up. Got it. Now I just need the bit. You know what I mean? Because we knew all the bits would cut together because we'd already done it. So it wasn't the case of just shooting loads of stuff and then trying to cut it together. It was also because there were so many elements in that. Like, you know, a single shot might have, you know, it might have the car driving, the fake bat, the a green screen bit, the actors, you know, so you almost had to know how it was all going to piece together so you could schedule it, you know.
Yeah, very interesting. And obviously there's a lot of kind of troubleshooting that happens. Your mind coming up to this.
Yeah. Trying to figure that stuff out is fun, you know. Because we didn't know how to do deco as a bat head, you know. So we'd do versions of like, you know, do we put a puppet head? Look, you know, and what's the size of that head? And you know, but like we used a fake. We actually ordered a plastic bat that had mechanical wings. So that is it's that, like, the head is green screened, but the actual bat is a real bat that we filmed on green screen, and we'd basically play the scene and the person would watch it and puppeteer the bat so it would maneuver in the right way, you know, so then when you fitted it in. But it was nice to do that, you know. It was nice to have a real bat with flapping wings and you'd be moving it around.
So when you come to your characters as well, because I'm totally picturing Natalie as a bat. And then Natalie, again, you were saying the narcissistic personality,
Yes.
that is exactly in there. How do you like do you ever envisage the bigger world? Is it always like this is for this story, this might be something that I'll go back to in another couple of years? Because I do love that world where you're like, actually, yeah, it's something that's drawn to these sort of like vaguely toxic people.
Do you mean this story, like with
Yeah.
these characters?
Yeah, like so
Um,
if you like have you kind of created a wider universe in your mind, like side characters, would this be something that you could revisit? Is
I mean,
this
I definitely wrote, oh, if this was a series, here's 10 possible episode ideas. They raid the blood bank, or they, um, can't remember off the top of my head, but like I did write those down. It was like, oh, that could certainly work as that type of thing. And then separately, I was talking to a friend of mine just about the idea of the taxi service, that operates, because I like the idea of, taxis. They always know what's going on in the city. They kind of know what's happening at night. There's something where they're slightly, they see an underground version of the city that people might not be aware of, And so it always struck me that the taxi drivers there's also a world there that, you could explore the supernatural side of Dublin, at night. So there's a couple of ideas there. Yeah, yeah. But I haven't sat down
to ponder them
just
out?
yet.
Because just when you were saying those things, I was like, actually, they're very kind of formulated ideas that feel very tangible. That I'm just curious to like when you're creating this, does it exist in a vacuum, or have you kind of allowed your mind to like really exist in that world?
Yeah, because in a way, like that is the hard part done. Like I can get like those two guys, the two actors, for example, and like even the end, there's a little scene where they're on the phones to each other. Like we shot that in like one take, 5 minutes, and it's just because they know who they are, they know what they're playing. Just give them, the basics of it, and off they go. Like so, there's like sometimes you're struggling to find that dynamic. It's like a dynamic, like how these characters interact is often very hard to find or figure out. Or um so yeah maybe I should need to get on that.
Yeah, do a few like comic books in the meantime. You
Yeah,
can
yeah,
pretend
yeah,
they're proof of concept, but they could just be comic, but like I don't know, because I kind of think
yeah.
it's a very interesting world and they're very interesting premises, and sort of in a way that I hadn't seen it exactly before, like playing on the cliches in a self-aware way, but then like it's so familiar as well. I don't know, it really worked for me anyway.
Cool,
um,
cool.
so you were saying that it's screened a lot at different festivals around. Where did you find different places and different crowds picked up on different things? Because the horror fans would be, very different
Mhm.
from say the Galway Film Flat people.
Yeah. Like some of the festivals are, there's like Brussels is a crazy festival. Like that was great, because the audience, it's basically, I don't know if you know the audience over there, but they have all these cues for movies. So basically they clap for all the credits. If they see a moon, they start howling. They if someone leaves a door open, they start shouting. So there's a real um it's a real high energy screening. And the thing is, if you've made a very serious slow movie, they still react like that, but they'll kind of ruin the buzz of the movie.
So this
Whereas
is this is this is just their film festival, like their kind of national film festival that they have, or is that for like a horror thing? Or
it's no BIFF, so it's the Brussels International Fantasy Film Festival, something like
okay,
that.
so it is that genre thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah. So
picture
genre
like people
festival.
getting really into it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they properly go wild, And so like a film like this is kind of perfect for it, because they're sort of primed, I remember like they start cheering for the RT logo at the start, and it's like, okay, this is gonna be good, you know. And then Sitges is good because they translate all the films. So basically they've got subtitles basically. So they, in a way, they're getting the jokes. So the ones I And then Glasgow would get the jokes as well, you know. So it's the ones, there was one or two where I can't remember, where Germany, where they just play the English version, you know, because they, you know, speak English and German. But I think that was the one where they probably just wouldn't have got it, you know, because it's a hard version of English to sort of take in, you know.
It's very regionalized, and it's a very specific type of humor as well, you know, like that there's a lot of references that I don't know, like I'm sure Germany has them all. I suppose probably be cut out, but like it's not like they're known for their hilarity, you know. I know individual Germans are quite funny. Yeah, they're not necessarily known for that. So I wonder, is that part of it? And again, it's such a kind of different flavor of it. I love one of the things that I thought was really funny was Anthony Head's character, how dry he was.
Yeah, and that did evolve, like, because a part of the lockdown, this is what was good, where we got shut down and we had these 6 months, and it just and as I was saying, I was shooting bits of the film and just with friends and video cameras, and just to get, like, I always remember when I was reading about how they did Aladdin, you know, and when they were making Aladdin, they, you know, they do, I suppose for all animations, they, you know, they do a very rough storyboard, but it's like a video storyboard, you know, where they put in the voices and they watch it. And I remember, like, you know, when they done that, they realized, I think Aladdin had a mother or something, and they watched it and they go, oh God, no, we don't need that mother character. So it was weird, because I did that for the film and I watched my sort of hour-long version of it all, like, and you just start to feel the rhythm and when it's lagging and stuff. And what used to happen is Anthony's character was thrown out in the shed and he kind of stayed out there, and I really felt him missing from the film. So I was like, oh, why not just put him into the room with the three lads, you know? So he's just there, even if he doesn't have all the lines all the time, even just his reactions. But then, and because he was there, we started giving him more stuff to do. So I think that was, like, I'm really glad I made that decision, you know, because it was kind of late in the day. And yeah, because even Anthony, the first version he read, because I remember saying, oh, I liked being stuck out in the shed, you know. But yeah, a lot of the fun stuff came out of just the three of them kind of bouncing off each other.
Because there's a very specific dynamic. There's the kind of like slightly simple but straight guy. There's the kind of charming narcissist character, and then that kind of earnest deadpan sarcastic thing. Like it's really lovely kind of triptych of contrast that like adds to the chemistry, instead of like one person being a spare tool. So it's like it's super fun dynamic.
And even
just fun watching Anthony Head just exist.
Yeah, and I liked when we gave him a kind of a nastier edge, you know. I think that was like my housemate again. I have to give him credit, Mike Heenahan. You know, we were working together, and I think one of his ideas was, why doesn't he, you know, Anthony, he pulls the teeth out, but he does it for a vindictive reason, like just to, like, I thought that was kind of a clue that he wasn't just helping him. He was like, well, I'm gonna, you know, he's got a little bit of a streak, you know, a sinister streak to him. And also his boring side. And Anthony, like, he properly did research into, you know, he talked to friends who were in train, like, clubs and stuff, you know, so he got those particular phrases, you know. And, you know, so there was a, you know, it was nice to see him sort of really try and, you know, bring his own ideas to it. You know.
So what would be next on the to-do list? So that's like part of the bucket list vampire film thing ticked. Would you continue down this path and go deeper into that? Is there a different area that you'd like to cover?
Yeah, I think it's like anything. You do one film and then you sort of feel compelled to do something slightly different. Like, because I'd done a more straight one before this, and then it was like, okay, I want to get back into the comedy horror. And then now I guess what I've tried to do now is just be writing more stuff. So it's not just one thing. Like, I have never done a ghost story, you know, so that sort of is pulling me a little bit. I mean, I haven't found the idea yet, but it's just, I've realized I haven't done that. And then there's another slasher. I mean, I always loved the slasher genre. So there's been one in development for a couple of years now. God, I had a meeting with the writers earlier today, and it's 11 years since that started. So like that project. And I think we're finally going, I think we've got it now. I think we've just about cracked it, you know.
Well,
But I mean,
fair play for you for like pushing that. I'd say like projects like that, you kind of feel like if they're not taking off, you'd be tempted to go, "Oh, is it finished?" But like it must take so much work to keep going and stuff.
Totally, yeah. I mean, that's why you really have to love the ideas or the characters, because they have to kind of stand the test of time, you know, or you have to, you know, even if you haven't read it, like when I say 11 years, I mean, there's years in there we never even touched it, you know, or it was abandoned, and then sort of go back to it. That's the thing, you go back to it and read it and go, oh my God, this is really good. You know, this is fun, or I haven't seen this idea yet. So it just kind of reawakens your sort of desire to do it. But I guess that's probably the one that's most likely, just because it's in, you know, it's in the process of being developed, you know.
And you were saying the ghost story. I don't know, Banshees? Didn't you have like your short film about Banshees?
Yeah, yeah.
Sort of a ghost story.
It's kind of, yeah. I guess I mean features.
That.
I guess I mean features, you know. But the Banshee for sure. Like, I mean, it's not for a lack of trying, you know. I've been writing Banshee films since I think I got development for one in 2004. So but it just didn't take off at the end. But I've always wanted to do that, like, yeah, specifically like Irish ghost story, you know. But yeah, sometimes, yeah, you just have to wait for their time to ripen, you know.
So we can't wait to see what is happening next. So thank you so much for chatting with us. That such a great film. Definitely recommend it. 10 out of 10.
Cool.